Hello, in today's video, we're going to be talking about a important societal question, and that is how does homelessness for teenagers impact their mental health? It's a growing problem, a growing issue, and it does impact us all. So we're going to have a conversation about that in this video. We'll begin by talking about physical health. Tie that into mental health, how they're connected. Also, is homelessness itself causing those physical and mental problems, or do physical and mental problems also contribute to the homelessness factor? That sort of connection, what that is. What are the barriers that might be preventing teens from getting help? And how does their health reinforce the cycle? We'll want to talk about all those, and of course, we got to look at solutions. We'll be covering all that in this video. So one of the questions, one of the challenges when we're talking about teenage homelessness, because teenagers aren't typically thought of as being responsible for having to provide their own home, right? So if they are out on the streets, it's likely because of whatever's going on in their home situation, potentially they're runaways, those sort of things. But it is a huge problem. There's over 4 million homeless teenagers in America. That represents about 10% of all kids aged 10 to 19. So that's a big issue. And when they are out on the streets, they aren't eating well. They aren't being properly kept from the climate around. They're in dangerous situations often, particularly the younger you are. And some of the adults who are also out on the streets, they become vulnerable. The New York Times, in an article 2023, saying that there's a surge in respiratory illnesses amongst homeless teens because they aren't getting the proper care and nutrition and all those sort of things. It puts a burden on us in many ways as a society, but also when they become really sick and have sincere problems, they end up in the emergency room and we end up footing the bill that way. So all of those things, that physical health is going to deteriorate for people who are living on the streets, no matter your age. So that's something that does impact us all with potentially increased crime and medical costs. And just if you think about teenagers, they're supposed to be our next group of leaders. So 4 point something million are headed down a path that's not good for us as a society. So I think it goes without saying that mental health plays into homelessness in general. But for teenagers, again, we aren't talking about their mental health having kept them from maybe being employable. Therefore, they don't have a place to live. They end up in the streets because, again, teenagers who are on the streets in all likelihood because they've run away from whatever environment, or their families are out on the streets, or they've kind of left their family because it's not a safe place to be. All those kinds of things that you can imagine. So their mental health begins to suffer, if it wasn't already suffering, from regular, constant, chronic stress. When you're under stress, fear, right? A lot of fear often is dominant emotion in some of these situations that are causing kids to be out on the streets. When they're out on the streets, there is that fear as well, anxiety and worry about getting the proper food, about keeping yourself safe and protecting yourself. And when you're under chronic fear and chronic stress, it's unhealthy mentally. Whole brain development. Teenagers, their brains are developing still, and it's rewiring that. And then that whole rewiring process, these habits that are being created early on at a young age, make it much harder to break that cycle and get out of it the longer it goes, right? So the mental health factor is enormous in creating this downward cycle, this pattern of potential long-term homelessness and unemployability and all the negative things that come with that. So teenagers who are out on the street are homeless have some real serious barriers to getting medical care. Until they get to a point where it is an emergency, they're often denied access to care because they don't have ID, proof of residence, no insurance, there's no known way that they're going to be able to pay for it. They aren't legal age in most regards. So all of those things, these free clinics, going to a doctor's office, any of those things that could be preventative when they are beginning to go, oh, I don't feel so good. I don't really, my health isn't so good. Well, if they do go, there's a good chance they might not be able to get the care because they're minors, no insurance, all of those things I just stated. Those are some serious barriers for them to getting the medical care that they need until it becomes a real emergency. I think it becomes pretty obvious that when you have bad physical health, it impacts your mental health. Mental health impacts your physical health. And when you aren't feeling good regularly, when you're under this constant stress regularly, you don't perform well. You don't show up to school frequently. Education gets interrupted. Your ability to develop the skills that are really employable get interrupted or don't get developed. Your ability to show up regularly for work doesn't happen. You're far more likely to be laid off frequently. All that ability to earn income is diminished dramatically. Therefore, you stay on the streets. When you're on the streets, you're more likely to be mentally ill and physically ill. It becomes that downward cycle. Let me tell you about a student we had who would show up beginning his freshman year, worked in a day treatment program in a city school, and beginning his freshman year at this program, he showed up to school where he knew he had to go, couldn't go to a regular school, and he'd be there for like 2 weeks. And then he would gradually drop off the map. He lived on the streets for most of the time. The end of the year, the last 2 or 3 weeks, he would show up. He'd show up and come just about every day. So this had happened for like 3 years in a row, and the director of the program's like, all right, what is it that's bringing this kid here for the first 2 or 3 weeks of school on his own and the last 2 or 3 weeks of school and not in between? What's going on there? And as we try to answer that question, that can help us understand some of the problems and challenges of helping homeless teens. All right, it's a huge issue, societal issue. There's obviously lots of things about trying to get the most bang for a buck when we think about how we as taxpayers and all of the sort of programs that we are looking for. Oftentimes we are relying on schools to provide the nutrition, the nursing care, those sort of things. Well, homeless kids typically, they aren't going to school very much, right? The other thing is, what can we do when they are young to help them deal with these stressors that may be driving them out of the home by the time they are teenagers? So what can we do in that avenue? And then what can we do to make sure health-wise they're getting good nutrition on a regular basis, they're getting regular health care, so that aspect, and then we can get them into programs to give them the skills. Ideally, this is a real challenge, but I would be an advocate for residential-based programs that really focus a whole lot on the mindset issues and then the education and health-related stuff that come along with it. Come to another end of another video, important topic. So I hope we have some of you kind of think about what we can do about this challenge, because it is a challenge. I encourage you all to subscribe to the channel, check out our other videos. In particular, you might be interested in the video, how does advertising impact teen mental health? Check that video out today, and hopefully I'll see you in another video.